Dean Martin did more than just sing and act. He was in a bad mood, keeps their cool all the time. With a drink in his hand and a joke on his tongue, he ruled Hollywood. But behind that easygoing charm was a life full of quiet sorrow, pain, and loss. He made it to the top, but it cost him a lot. Dean had a tangled love life, and the deaths of his son and then his beloved wife made his story go from glamorous to heartbreaking. Don't miss this chance to learn more about the man behind the fame, his life, his love, and the sadness that followed until he died in 1995. The Steubenville Boy. Dean Martin wasn't always Dean Martin. His birthday is June 7, 1917, and he was born in Steubenville, Ohio. His family is from Italy. His father was a barber named Gaetano Croetti, and his mother is Italian and was born in Ohio. Dino grew up in a home where people only spoke Italian. He didn't learn English until he was 5 years old. He had a hard time in school because of this. Other kids picked on him because he didn't speak English well. His first few years of school were tough. He had a different feeling. In the end, he said that he didn't like school. "I had a bike and I never skipped a meal, but I was just too smart for those teachers in school," he joked one time. People laughed at that line, but it also meant something more. He didn't feel like he belonged. He was done by the 10th grade. He quit school and never went back to the classroom again. He went in a very different direction after making that choice, one with lots of tough jobs, danger and hard work, trying to make a future. Dino tried to do what his father did after he graduated from school. His dad wished he would become a barber. Dino had other plans, though. He did a lot of little jobs to make ends meet. A gas station worker, a milkman, and even a shop clerk. He wasn't excited about these jobs, though. Boxing was what interested him. The name Dino used to fight was Kid Crochet. It was hard to make money that way. He said he had 12 fights and won all but 11. That means he only won one. Even though he didn't win much, the experience changed him. His nose was broken, his lip was scarred, and his knuckles were broken because he couldn't even buy the hand wraps that boxers use. Dean did more than just fight in the ring, though. He went to New York City and lived with Sonny King, who was also an entertainer who was having a hard time. Both of the young guys had dreams, but they needed money to live. So they thought of a strange plan. They used their small room as a kind of secret fight club. People paid to watch them box bare knuckle in their living room. There would be fights until someone was knocked out. Deep down, Dean knew this wasn't the life he wanted. He even beat Sonny in the first round of a real fight. It wasn't possible to get beat up every day. He knew something had to change, but he didn't know what. From rooms full of smoke to singing on stage. Dino still had to find work after he quit fighting. He went to a secret casino hidden behind a smoke shop, which was just as sketchy. Perhaps against the law, but it paid. He worked as a guy who moved the roulette wheel and dealt blackjack. Here in this world full of smoke, something strange took place. Dino began to sing. People started to notice his voice after he started singing for his co-workers. It felt soft, warm, and charming. One person who heard him was the band leader. In the area, Ernie McKay. He told Dino that he could join the band. When Dino said yes, things began to change in his life. He first played in bars in Ohio under the name Dino Martini. In 1938, he joined the band of another famous band leader, Sammy Watkins, after being inspired by opera star Nino Martini. Watkins took him on tour and gave him one piece of advice that would change his life. "You should become Dean Martin." That's what he did. Dean lived in New York and did shows full-time by 1943. It wasn't easy, though. To stand out, he had to put in a lot of work and keep changing how he looked. There was more to his plans than just making songs. He was making a fake self. That character would soon be known all over the world. Dean Martin's act changed as he became better known. He put on a show, not just sang. He always looked calm and easygoing as he walked onto the stage with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He acted like all he wanted to do was have fun. He didn't come up with that act, though. He copied the style of a performer named Phil Harris, who made a name for himself as a showman who chased women while drinking a lot. Dean made the look his own, though. It made his fans love him. People called him the King of Cool. But what was going on inside wasn't always the same as what people saw. Dean didn't say anything. He didn't talk much, even at parties and other big events. During a rare conversation with Oriana Falizzi in 1967, he talked about why everyone thought I was cocky and conceited. "I wasn't," he said. "I'm not sure what to say. I wasn't good at English." He felt like he didn't belong, even though he was a star because he had trouble with words at school. That's why he didn't talk much. Some people got him wrong. They thought he was cold or far away, but he was just shy. And being shy never really went away. His life was full of different things. He was sure of himself and funny on stage. He was shy and nervous when he wasn't on stage, but he never forgot where he came from. He had a hard childhood and struggled with his own feelings his whole life. It was Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. Dean Martin's life changed a lot in August 1944. At the Belmont Plaza Hotel in New York, he met a young performer named Jerry Lewis. When Dean saw Jerry acting at the hotel's Glass Hat Club, he said, "Hey, I saw your act. You're a funny kid." That one comment began a friendship that would last for 10 years. The two men quickly became friends. They joined their shows together to make a team. On July 24, 1946, they played their first show together at the 500 Club in Atlantic City. Their first show didn't go well, though. They were told by the club owner, Skinny D'Amato, that they would be fired if the next show wasn't better. The crowd didn't laugh. They quickly went to the alley behind the club and thought of a new plan. While Dean tried to sing, Jerry would get in the way like a bad busboy. Then Dean would throw bread rolls at Jerry, which would make a mess. People loved it because it was crazy, silly, and funny. Their jobs changed because of this new law. They pulled funny faces, told jokes, and made up stories on the spot. They didn't care about the crowd. Putting on shows for each other was what made everyone laugh the most. The act got bigger. All along the East Coast, they had shows. The Copacabana in New York was their first big show. They were a big hit. They first performed on TV in 1948 on the first episode of The Ed Sullivan Show, which was called The Toast of the Town at the time. They were on the show with famous artists like Rodgers and Hammerstein. They hired young writers Norman Lear and Ed Simmons to make their act even better. From clubs to radio and movies, these writers helped them get there. In 1949, they got a part in the movie My Friend Irma through Paramount, where they were funny. But the deal gave them freedom. Abel Gressler, their publicist, made sure that they could make one movie a year with their own company, York Productions. Besides that, they had full power over their radio and TV shows, records and club shows. They made a lot of money from this. Lewis wrote in his book, Dean and Me, "Dean was one of the great comic geniuses of all time." Dean and Lewis were very close friends. Jerry was Dean's best man when he got married again in 1949. But cracks were appearing behind the laughter, when people stopped laughing. Things weren't perfect, even though they were successful. Some critics said that the two movies were too alike. Dean got tired of always having the same part in movies. What did he want? He stopped putting as much attention into their shows. A picture from 1954, when Three Ring Circus was being filmed, was used on the cover of Look magazine. Dean was cut out of the picture, but Jerry Lewis and actress Sherry North were in it. That was the last blow. Jack Keller, who is in charge of press for them, says that Dean stomped onto the set with the magazine. He swore at Keller and threw it in his face. Jerry Lewis recalled how Dean's mood changed. Dean told me one day, "If you ever want to quit, just let me know." It wasn't fun anymore for Dean, and he didn't feel like he was a part of the show. He later asked, "Why the hell should I come in on time? I have nothing to do." Dean didn't sing in Three Ring Circus until 35 minutes in, and when he did, it was an old song called It's a big, wide, wonderful world, sung to animals. The relationship that used to feel magical now felt unfair. Dean was professional and worked until the end of the contract. But they broke up on July 25, 1956, exactly 10 years after they first worked together. Dean left quietly, but with his head held high. Life with the Rat Pack. Dean didn't slow down after he broke up with Jerry Lewis. He focused on his singing and acting careers and quickly became a big name in Las Vegas. It was there that he met the Rat Pack, which was made up of Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford. They were known for their classy, party-loving lifestyle full of late nights, laughter, and alcohol. But while the group loved the wildlife, Dean wasn't quite like them. People outside the group thought Dean was the craziest. Sinatra joked, "He's got a tan because he found a bar with a skylight." But Dean wasn't really that into parties. He was usually the first one out the door in the morning. Tom Dreon, a comedian, who opened for Sinatra, said that Dean's quiet way of doing things often irritated Frank. But over time, Sinatra came to respect him more because of it. Dean wasn't trying to fit in. He just did what felt right for him. Dean and Frank were very close friends. Dean's daughter Diana once said, "To watch them on stage together was brilliant because you could see the love in their eyes, the respect for each other. Their closeness wasn't just for show. Their families were close too. They were more like brothers than just co-stars. But even close friendships can be put to the test. The mob, the drinks, and the act behind the man." Dean Martin may have become a smooth Hollywood star, but his past wasn't so clean. Before he became famous, he worked as a bootlegging and even fought in bare-knuckle boxing matches. So when he started performing with the Rat Pack for crowds with ties to the mob, it didn't scare him like it did other people. He had already seen the bad side of life. Frank Sinatra had close ties to the mob, and most of the Rat Pack were polite and quiet around gangsters. But Dean didn't follow their rules. Someone from the mob came up to him after one show and said, "Thank you for helping us out." Dean did not smile. He turned to them, looked them in the eye, and said, "No, I did it for Frank." Then he left. That brave move showed that Dean's past wasn't weakening him. It made him brave. The way people saw Dean also made him look like he drank a lot. On stage, he was almost always seen with a whiskey glass in his hand. Sammy Davis Jr., another member of the Rat Pack, once joked, "If this doesn't straighten my hair, nothing will." The glass, however, was actually full of Martinelli's apple juice. It was all part of the game. Dean's slurred speech and acting drunk were not real. Patty Grebo, his backup singer, said it was just show business. In a talk show, Jerry Lewis even agreed with that. Dean himself told the Saturday Evening Post that he didn't drink nearly as much as I say I do. In that case, Dean Martin's charm came from more than just his voice. It was in how easy he seemed to do it. The show with Dean Martin. Dean said yes to NBC's offer of his own comedy show in the middle of the 1960s, but only on his own terms. He told them he could only work on Sundays, didn't want to practice, and would own the show once it aired. "Yes," NBC said. "What else do you know?" Dean didn't show up to practices. He had a stand-in do the whole act with the dancers and guests instead. If there wasn't a football game on TV, Dean would sometimes watch the practice on a screen in his changing room. But when the cameras started rolling, Dean was calm, smooth, and in charge. From 1965 to 1974, 40 million people watched that show, called The Dean Martin Show. People liked how he seemed so natural. "The reason this show is a hit is that it's me up there on that screen. It ain't nothing fake. That's really me," Dean once said. He was so cool that even Elvis Presley looked up to him. Elvis didn't get along with artists like Sinatra, but he admired Dean. In the early 1950s, Dean was one of Elvis's favorite singers. Dean was even at an Elvis show where Elvis sang Dean's hit song "Everybody Loves Somebody." Dean didn't read much, but he loved comic books. Black Beauty was the only full book he had ever read. "If you're lucky, you don't have to be smart," he once said. That line was a great reflection of how laid back he seemed. He read cartoons well into his adult years. Meeting Bob Kane, the man who made Batman, was one of the few times he was famous. Dean even had his own comic book series with Jerry Lewis. It was called The Adventures of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, and had 40 issues from 1952 to 1957. A star that is quiet and has a sad heart. In 1987, bad things happened. Paul Dean, Dean's son, died in a plane crash. Dean was very sad about it. Among other things, he pulled away from his friendship with Sinatra. He left them on their tour too. That was the start of the trip. Later, Tom Dries said that this was the point at which they started to move apart. Dean had lost a part of himself, but the two men got back together in the end. They took care of that split quickly. Frank Sinatra gave a moving farewell to Dean after he died. "Dean has been like the air I breathe, always there, close by. He was my brother, not by blood, but by choice," he said. Dean Martin was humble and never tried to get attention. In 1965, he started The Dean Martin Show, a variety show where he sang, joked, and always looked comfortable. The show became a hit because of Dean's easygoing charm. He made it look like it was natural. From 1974 to 1984, he hosted The Dean Martin Celebrity Roast, a show where celebrities, comedians, and even politicians were made fun of. Dean kept performing on stages and in nightclubs and recording music. By the end of his career, he had been in 85 movies and TV shows, and sold more than 50 million records around the world, including over 12 million in the U.S. alone. His voice became a part of American culture, and songs like "That's Amore Sway," "Everybody Loves Somebody," and "Ain't That a Kick in the Head" are still played today. Dean Martin made people laugh, made music, and made memories, but he also carried more weight than most people knew. It had to do with his personal life, with his first love, and the start of a big family. Dean Martin married Elizabeth Ann Betty McDonald for the first time in 1941. Betty and Dean lived together in Cleveland Heights, Ohio after they got married. They started having children soon after. Craig was their first child, and Claudia, Gail, and Diana were born in 1944, 1945, and 1948, respectively. They had 4 kids together, 1 boy and 3 girls, but the marriage didn't last. They split up in 1949 after 8 years together. Dean got custody of all 4 kids, and Betty moved to the San Francisco area after the divorce. She stayed out of the spotlight and died in 1989. Betty's time with Dean may have ended early, but she was there while he was still making his name. Dean would have a big family, and she helped raise the first half of it. Even after they split up, Dean's kids stayed close to him. But Dean's life changed again soon after Betty left for someone who would become his third wife and stay with him for 24 years. Dean got married again just 1 week after his divorce from Betty was final. This time, he married model and former Orange Bull queen Jean Beager. They got married on September 1, 1949, at the home of a famous Hollywood club owner. Jerry Lewis was Dean's best man. Jean and Dean met the year before at a club in Miami on New Year's Eve. At the time, she didn't even know who Dean or Jerry was. But Jean told Nick Toscas, writer, "We locked eyes, and I knew. We fell deeply in love." They had 3 kids together, Dean Paul Jr. in 1951, Richie in 1953, and Gina in 1956. Dean already had 4 kids from his first marriage, so Jean took on the role of mother to a large family. In all, they raised 7 kids. Dean's comedic work often made fun of his growing family. He was known for telling jokes like, "I've got 7 kids." The 3 words you hear most often in my house are, "hello," "goodbye," and "I'm pregnant." Dean and Jean's life seemed perfect from the outside. They were one of the most popular couples in Hollywood, Dean rose to fame as a singer, actress, and Vegas' main attraction while they were married. He also joined Frank Sinatra in the famous Rat Pack. But even though everything went well, it didn't last forever. Jen said in a statement on December 10, 1969, that they were splitting up. They got a divorce in 1972 after being married for 24 years. Dean was the one who put things in. He used another well-known line when asked about it. Some people say, "It's polite to let the wife file, but everyone knows I'm not a gentleman." Dean and John stayed in touch after they got separated, especially after a tragedy in their family years later, the last wedding and the shortest marriage. Dean wasn't single for very long. He got married again the same year he left Jean, 1973. This time, it was to Catherine Horn, who works as a receptionist at a salon in Beverly Hills. A family friend put them in touch with each other, and they quickly chose to get married. It was a big wedding with lots of famous people, like Frank Sinatra. The wedding was big, but the marriage wasn't meant to last. Dean and Catherine were only married for 3 years before they split up in 1976. Dean took in Catherine's daughter, Sasha, and raised her as his own, even though they didn't have any children together. Dean was no longer interested in getting married after this. In the last 19 years of his life, he never got married again. This was his last marriage. But what's interesting is that Dean got back in touch with Jean after his breakup with Catherine. They didn't get married again, but they did spend time together, especially after their son's death, which was very sad. The breakup that made Dean and John get back together. Dean Paul Martin Jr., Dean's son, killed in a military jet crash in 1987. He was only 35 years old. Dean was very sad. He changed a lot after the loss. This terrible event brought Dean and Jean back together. Even after they got divorced, they stayed friends, but now their bond got stronger. As he dealt with the grief of losing a child, Jean was there for him. There are many people who say Dean was never quite the same again after that. Dean and Jean stayed close until Dean's death in 1995 from effects from lung cancer. An icon died on Christmas Day, and Jean lost the man she used to call the love of her life. Jean never married again. In Beverly Hills, she had a quiet life. She died in 2016 after a long fight with cancer. She was 89 years old. Not long before, in August 2016, their artist son Richie Martin had died. Dean and John separated after being married, but their love for each other stayed strong until the end. Many people thought of Dean Martin as a family man, but things were not always so. Great behind the scenes, there are affairs, gossip, and a very dangerous secret. In her autobiography, Sandra Lansky, daughter of the famous mobster Meir Lansky, wrote about events that shocked many people many years later. Sandra told the police that she slept with Dean Martin while he was still married to Jean. Not just any time, but while John was carrying their daughter Gina. Sandy wrote in her book, "I had never seen a manliness like Dean Martin's. I kept track and found that we kissed 6 times in one night. Dean wanted to save her every second, and they were going to drink Coke between rounds," she said. During the affair, they agreed not to talk about their personal lives, but she said, they didn't say it out loud either. She said she had no idea at the time that Dean's wife was pregnant. People never saw this side of Dean. The cool, charming star who was a good husband and father was what most of his fans thought. The musical. Director of the Dean Martin Show, Lee Hale, once said, "Dean's viewers knew he was a good husband and father. The drinking and broad jokes were just part of the act." People saw a different side of Dean through Sandra's story. Someone who was funny and charming, but also had secrets and made mistakes along the way. He changed a lot after that. People who knew Dean Martin well saw that he had changed after the death of his son, even though he seemed calm on the outside. Author William Keck says Dean was going through more than just loss. He was upset about something. In his book, When You Step Upon a Star, The Cringe-Worthy Confessions of a Tabloid Bad Boy, Keck wrote about how sad Dean's last years were. He said that Dean still smiled and chatted with the people around him, but that his spark had gone away. It wasn't just the loss. It hurt like it would never go away. Fox News reported that Dean would often tell Keck, "I'll be back on that stage one day. You'll see me." But Dean knew in his heart that he was done. He had no plans to put on another show. He no longer had any desire to do it. The people around him also saw this. Artist and close friend Rich Little said it best. He was done with life after losing his son. He lost a big part of himself and never got it back. Those words made the picture very clear. Dean had lost more than a kid. He had lost himself. Gary Lewis says that's when Dean started drinking seriously. Jerry said, "Dean let himself go. The show stopped being an act. The pain took over. He didn't talk much about it or try to get attention, but people who had known him for years could tell the difference. Dean Martin, who used to light up every room, now just wanted peace and quiet. He stepped away from the spotlight and slowly faded out of public life. It was his last goodbye." Dean's health began to get worse in 1993. He had been a heavy smoker all his life, and it finally caught up with him. At Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. Doctors told him that surgery could help him live longer, but Dean refused to get it done. By early 1995, he had quit public life. Dean Martin died on Christmas Day of that same year from acute respiratory failure caused by emphysema. He was 78 years old. His death was felt all over the world. In Las Vegas, a city he helped make famous, the lights on the Strip were turned down in his honor. Dean was buried at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. One line from his most famous song, "Everybody Loves Somebody Sometime," is written on his tombstone. William Keck, who had talked to Dean in his last years, went to the private VIP funeral. A lot of famous people came to say goodbye, but it was in the middle of the service when Rosemary Clooney, who is close with George Clooney and is his aunt, started to sing "Everybody Loves Somebody." Keck said it was so strange. In a room full of stars, it was a simple song from a friend that said it all. A quiet, personal goodbye to a man the world knew as a legend, but who was really just a father, a friend, and a man who missed his son. Did Dean Martin really find peace in his last years, or did he always carry that sadness? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check back for more amazing stories from the past of Hollywood. See you next time.